All right, we are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of The Intersection. We apologize if you had to jump some links. We had some internal technical difficulties that we won't discuss publicly. We don't air our private business. Um, but we're happy to have you with us. With those on Periscope, you can always watch us live on any of our Periscopes or via the Hangout. Hold on, I got some sound coming out of here somewhere. Hold on. There we go. But today we're appreciative to be here. When we decided to come together and create this show, we wanted to talk about the topics that should be discussed but aren't being discussed on the major media networks. And I think today we have a great example of one. But before we jump into that, I want to throw it to my great co-hosts to let them do their quick introductions. First, ladies first, Ty Beauchamp, please say hello. Here we go. There, you're on mute, baby girl.
So as Ty Beauchamp is trying to figure out how to take herself off of mute.
I'm off mute now. Oh, sorry. Did I? I'm
Oh my God, the digital divide is real. I love you, Ty. Don't worry about it.
Go ahead, Jeff. I'm gonna let you go then.
No, please, by all means.
Back on mute.
I would never try to stand in the way of of all that you are bringing and offering. So by all means, Ty Beauchamp, please introduce yourself to the people.
I'm Ty Beauchamp, and I am digitally connected right now, and very happy to be joining. I'm in this conversation with my co-host Jeff and Navarro and Jeffrey. We're gonna have a really great conversation tonight. So happy Sunday, my loves.
Absolutely, and welcome everybody. My name is Jeff Johnson. Excited to have this conversation with you as I think we attempt to have many conversations with you, but there's something uniquely important and special about the conversation that we're going to have today. So we appreciate you all being on.
Absolutely. So, let's jump right into this topic because I believe that it's going to create a lot of discussions. As always, if you guys have questions for us, use the hashtag The Intersection on Twitter or use the chat room in the Hangout to post questions and we'll get to them. But if any of you know me, you know that my passion in life is closing the digital divide and doing it on multiple levels and really just creating opportunities for others. And during my travels, I meet a lot of people doing great work. And one of those people we have as a guest on today. Rodney Sampson. If I listed his resume, it would take the whole half an hour. But a couple highlights. More recently, he was the diversity casting director for the Shark Tank TV show. He has 4 books, one of which he's known for called Kingdomnomics. But recently with Paul Judge, who was like the equivalent of the Black Bill Gates in the tech community, he and Rodney have started a program to train and give people digital opportunities in the Atlanta area. So without further ado, if you guys will welcome our guest for today, Rodney Sampson. Rodney, welcome to the show.
Hey everyone, it's good to be here.
So Rodney, maybe there was a reason why I reached out to you specifically this week. Maybe tell a little bit about the program you and Paul created, and then talk a little bit about what happened over the weekend.
Sure. We actually about 6 months ago sat down with Atlanta's Workforce Development Agency. If you don't know Workforce Development Agencies, most towns have them, and they're designed to help disconnected youth or underemployed adults actually find upwardly mobile career paths. And sometimes that's easier said than done. So Michael Sterling, who leads the Atlanta Workforce Development, and I sat down and basically, mapped this out on a Post-it note to say how can we essentially pipeline disconnected youth into careers in tech, but not, work desks, not answering the phones, but, can we give them some skills which would allow them some upward mobility in a company, or the skills to actually go become a technical co-founder at some point themselves. So we branded it as, Code Start, hashtag Code Start. It's a 13-month program whereby we had about 100 people apply, and that was the funnel. We got that down to 17 students that we accepted into the program. And they started last week. So last week was the first week of class. They received 13 months of living expenses, $500 a month, and they have an apartment that they share with one of their roommates as well. So to have housing, a living expense as well. So it's 3 months of full intensive coding curriculum. They're actually learning Java, which is a language that's popular in terms of job openings here in Atlanta. After that, they're going to get some career readiness, culture fit, so diversity and inclusion training, financial literacy, which we're going to escalate that up because of the incident. And then once they're working, we'll begin the part-time entrepreneurship curriculum. Hopefully at the end of 13 months, I mean, the whole goal between Code Start and our Tech Hire initiative and a new joint venture we're about to announce, expanded joint venture with the Iron Yard, the nation's largest code boot camp, is, we're looking for the next Navarro Rice. We're looking for the next Paul Judges, the next Clarence Wootens, Lauren Malins. And I think we have to start building that top of funnel. And some of that talent is going to come from PWI, predominantly white institutions. A lot of it should be coming from HBCUs, but then there are those who sort of kind of fell through the cracks that a lot of our workforce development agencies are working with. So that gives kind of a little bit about why we're doing it and what our ultimate goals are as it relates to the program.
So no, it sounds fantastic, and I think it's definitely fitting a need. So maybe walk everybody through kind of the situation that had occurred over the weekend, so we can discuss that a little bit.
Sure. It actually occurred last Tuesday. So I'm here, sitting in a meeting in Tech Square Labs, and our resident director, Martin Pratt, he's known also as kind of a pioneer, one of the OG pioneers in the internet. He's known as I Love Black Women. You probably follow him, may not even know who he is. But anyway, he's the resident director for this program. So I get a call, and basically he's like, look, whatever you're doing, you need to drop it and come down here. So my first response was, no, I think I should be able to finish my meeting, and then we can talk and find out what's going on. He says, well, listen, if you don't come, one of our students is going to jail. And I said, what is this about? He puts an officer on the phone, Atlanta Police Department officer, and the officer says, are you going to come down here? And I'm saying, well, sir, can you tell me what's going on? So he basically hands the phone back to Martin and says, I don't think this guy's coming. And so I say, well, Martin, can you tell me what's going on? And he says, essentially, one of our students, after having tried to go to the post office and cash the money orders for free, two post offices told the students they didn't have enough cash on hand. So we were kind of side-eyed at that too. But anyway, this particular young man decided to venture off on his own and go to a cash checking outlet that he had an account at. So he basically went downtown Atlanta where he normally cashed his checks or money orders and essentially proceeded to cash it. At that point, the clerk, who's also one of the managers there, told him that it was bogus. It was a bogus money order, and said she was holding the money order and was also holding his ID, which is also illegal to hold someone's state-issued identification. To retrieve it, she told him he had to call the police to essentially get it back. He, not knowing, called the police, and then he called Martin, and Martin called me. So essentially, I took it serious at that point. I wanted to make sure I had the receipt of purchase, which was the day before, and the actual, kind of part of the receipt that shows that I wrote my handwriting or what have you on the actual money order. I jumped in an Uber, and 6-7 minutes later, I was standing outside of the cash checking establishment. I called the city of Atlanta as well. They've been pretty cooperative. Michael Sterling, who heads Atlanta Workforce Development, left City Hall and also came down to the scene. When I arrived, the young man was sitting in the back of the police car in handcuffs.
So there are 25,000 things wrong with this story. Number one, the kid had proper ID. Number two, he had a good check. Number three, he was at a place that already was charging him too much to cash the check in the first place.
Exactly.
Number four, he had done everything right. So not only was he working a job, giving his time, expanding his mind, nurturing a talent, doing everything within the law, but now somebody who doesn't think this kid should have this check in his hands now breaks the law in the name of profiling him, and the police, in many cases, validate them breaking the law by having the nerve to put him in the back of a car illegally.
Exactly.
Exactly. And I think, so talk a little bit about, maybe talk a little bit about, I mean, Jeff's clearly, you know, he's highlighted what's wrong with this, but talk a little bit about the young fella who is in the program. Like, what's his background? Where is he from? Like, what's kind of been his thoughts about this since it's occurred?
He actually is a young man that has aged out of the foster care system. So he has this perspective that institutions in general have let him down. He also has another particular point of view, which is what I tried to point out in the series of tweets and also in my follow-up Medium narrative, is that essentially once again in his life, and he pointed this out, it was a black clerk, black cops that actually did this to him. And so he had never even fathomed the concept, he said, of institutionalized racism or systemic oppression, and how that the oppressed can become the oppressor because they had really good teachers. And what he couldn't understand was that as he was talking to the cop, he felt as if the cop didn't even believe he was in a program. When the resident director showed him, he happened to have a copy of the agreement that he signed to suggest that he was in the program, it was almost like there was some contempt for him getting an opportunity, if that makes sense. And so I think it complicates it because it's easy for us, you know, it's easy when it's black coders matter or Black Lives Matter when it's white versus black. But Black Lives Matter as much and black opportunities matter as much when it's a person of color or someone who, you know, looks like you. And I think, I mean, Jeff, I've often heard, you know, you say your skin folk may not be your kin folk. So it complicated in his, you know, in his mind in terms of what was actually going on. And so it's opened up a lot of dialogue amongst the students because a lot of these students have been picked on by people who look like them. And I think that's what really complicates it. It's not a cut and dry. Now, when we start looking at the check cashing outlet industry, how it's mostly this unregulated and very predatory part of the financial services industry, they target the poor. They usually set up establishments, get this, by prisons and by bail bonds. So there's this symbiotic relationship whereby the young man was not even 3 minutes away from central lockup. Yeah. And then he wasn't even 3 minutes away from a bail bonding place. So there's this triangle that's entrapping them, and that's what complicated it. It still kind of complicates it for this young man as he navigates it.
So as you talk about it being complicated, how then are you doing two things? One, because if there was ever a greater example of what institutional racism is, so that these young people have the ability to understand that it's not necessarily about the faces that are represented, but it's the institution themselves. So this police officer in many cases is just following the script of what this institution says he or she is supposed to do with somebody like him. Secondly, I just want to know, do y'all have a lawyer yet? Because frankly, I'm just concerned about who begins to go before a judge as a result of the multiple laws that were broken toward these kids.
Well, you know, it's I was thinking back to, so I did my undergrad work at Tulane University. Jeff, I remember when we were out, I was hanging out with some of my fraternity brothers one night, and we got pulled over because we met the description. And, you know, we had been having fun, probably had a few drinks or what have you, and I think it was because of my state of mind that I actually said, I reached in my pocket, which I would never do now. I'd be like this. But I reached in my pocket and essentially said, wait a minute, I got my Tulane University ID. The moment we did that, the cops were like, okay, gentlemen, have a great, evening. And the incident was done. And it was sort of like the covering of an institution in that sense that gave us a pass. But you're absolutely right. When this young man, and I had this conversation with the officer, Michael Sterling, who happens to be a lawyer, was a prosecutor in Chicago, working at the law firm that the Obamas were at, came to Atlanta, working for the mayor. Mayor asked him to go fix workforce development, and that's how he found his purpose. So Mike and I were telling the cop, come on, you're in blue, you're the person of authority, we respect that, but you essentially are embracing the script and the narrative of what you have to do to either meet the quotas you have to meet, etc. But if you take the uniform off and you walk in there with a check, will you be susceptible to the same thing this young man was going through? And so we had that conversation. Now, we have also had the conversation.
And what was his response? Rodney, what was the police? I'm just curious. What was the police officer's response to that? Did he respond at all? Because I think part of the challenge that we, as we talk about institutionalized racism and the systems of oppression that exist and the script that people are following, is that when you've been practicing that role, how do you take off that armor to really be who you are, right? And so how do we change the system with having people who should know the plight and the experience within these, organizations, right?
Right.
What was his response?
I mean, you've made some good points. He really shrugged it off. And what's interesting about this particular officer, he really never made eye contact with none of us. Now, there were two other officers there that turned out to be allies. When they discovered that this young man actually had not done anything wrong, it wasn't the officer that was arresting him that took him out of the handcuffs and let him go. It was an ally who happened to be another black cop who said, wait a minute, let's get this guy out. He's sitting in the back of this patrol car in whatever state of mind, and he shouldn't be. And I think that even speaks to some of the data that's out there, and I can't source it. I've heard, Shaun King talk about it. I've heard Netta talk about it in terms of, why is there increased abuse in the households of police officers? Why is there increased suicide rates at the hands, police officers taking their lives? Maybe they are internalizing things that when they can't let it go when they, go into their normal situations. So I think we do have to discover that. Jeff, to answer your specific question, have we retained a lawyer, or has the student retained a lawyer at this point? No, he hasn't. What I've assured him, whether it's calling Ben Crump, who's a buddy and an ally, or calling other attorneys who could look at this, we have been talking to this young man about the long view. And the long view is you've got to finish these 12 weeks first, because the statute of limitations on addressing this, if you get distracted by trying to file a lawsuit right now, you may get behind and you may fall out of the program. The starting salary of a junior level, entry level engineer is about $62,500, and then in 3 years you can get up to six figures. So we're trying to convince the man to stay focused. And young man, I tell you, it's definitely tough. Even when it comes to getting a lawyer and suing the particular cash checking location. Well, we know that, yes, if we sue, or let's say he sues in this case, they're going to automatically countersue, and so this could go out for a period of time. So yes, I think the short view is, let's look at what the legal recourse is. The fact that an internal investigation has already been opened by the police department means that we've kind of got to a step where they're actually looking into it. The mayor, Mayor Reed, was actually in South Africa coordinating with us and coordinating with Michael Sterling and the commander to go ahead and escalate this, give it to a lieutenant, and open up what normally would probably take weeks to do anyway. So we've got an internal investigation there. But it's a balance here, because I'm getting a lot of people that are saying, okay, you need to take legal action immediately. This young man needs to take legal action immediately. I can tell you this, it's his right to do so. If he does so, he's probably going to drop out of the program because it's moving real fast. Now, what I would propose he do, and this is just my opinion, is finish the first 12 weeks, which is full-time, full-day, immersive. He's got to be here every day. He's got to get the homework. And make this his entrepreneurial project. Maybe it becomes a social impact project where he tries to hack this industry. Is there any fintech, financial technology? Is there any policy, federal, state, municipal, that can be applied to this, that can be re-looked at or what have you? But can he cause underrepresented, unbanked, spontaneous check cashers or what have you, whoever used that, to use another tool or platform that he creates? I'll tell you this, there's probably not a better place in America than Tech Square Labs for him to build something from nothing. But that's my opinion, is that at least for the next 12 weeks, he
I think it's an unbelievably important point, because at some point the legal side of this becomes a show one way or the other, and him finishing those 12 weeks becomes a career that changes the trajectory of his entire life, regardless of the end result of the case. And so I think it's incredibly important that you're laying that out. I think it's incredibly important, and that he's listening to you in that regard, because I think you're absolutely right. Now and you're not at all saying that the case isn't important. At the end of the day, you're saying, how do we change the legacy of this brother's family? And it's not guaranteed to do that through this case. However, him being able to have a marketable skill set and enter into the global marketplace with that skill set does change the legacy of he and his family. But I guess how are you balancing kind of the reality of what this energy brings to the program? Because whether or not he remains focused over the next 12 weeks and completes it or not, clearly this is shifted in a real way how these participants are viewing themselves,
right,
what it means for them to complete the program at all, and how they navigate even after completing the program. Who am I within this space, where even when I'm trying to do something different, right? I'm not on the block, I'm not hustling, I'm not banging, I'm not doing some of the stuff that I was doing before, I'm not doing the stuff that some of these cats on the block are doing. I'm doing everything that all y'all fools told me I was supposed to do. Right. And even in the midst of that, now they coming at me harder than they were before, because they don't believe me, even when I have made this sacrifice. So I guess, and I think you started to answer it a little bit, but I guess you talked about the pragmatic. What about the psychological?
Sure, and I can tell you it's been an intense psychological navigation for all of us, from the instructors, from those of us who created the program, and we're not the only people that's in that young man's ear. I can tell you. He's got family members, he's got friends, people along the way, you know, they see payday, right? They're like, hey, man, he's got some lawyer telling him this is a $10 million opportunity. And, you know, it's like, you know, he wants to be that martyr. And I'm like, nah, bro, you know, let's take a step back. So it's going to be interesting that week 2 starts tomorrow. Will he have all of his homework complete?
Right.
Because you can't miss a day of homework. I mean, it's incredibly intense. And we've tried to be sensitive to he and the other students that are going through this, even with the apology of the commander and the major from the police department and open internal investigation. I'm going to say the verdict is still out on whether or not he will stay the course. Now, we're going to continue to encourage him to stay down this path, but when your mindset hasn't really been renewed to the opportunities that are before you and people are pulling you back. It was my wife, we were having this conversation, and she was saying that environment itself can be addictive. I mean, the fact that they're in housing in Midtown Atlanta, they're coming to, you know, some would call, I mean, when David Drummond, Chief Legal Officer of Alphabet and Google, visited Atlanta last year. He said what Atlanta's ecosystem that's being built and how it parallels to what Silicon Valley has done and what he's seeing in Nigeria and Beijing and other places. He said Atlanta has something very, very special. And then we've been intentional about our diversity and inclusion. If he's going to have a high growth startup, it's probably going to happen right here at Tech Square Labs. But the fact is he's here, but he went back. It was easy for him to go back to from whence he had come to cash a check, whether it was his ego, whether it was like, look, I have never gone in there with a $500 check before. The moment he went back, he became susceptible to that. I don't know what the psychological outcome will be, but we're going to offer it to all of the students. And here's the thing. Therapy was a part of the curriculum anyway, but we were going to offer that after the coding piece. Now we're having to escalate it and kind of integrate it into the curriculum now so that it doesn't, this mindset doesn't spread throughout the rest of the cohort and we lose someone else. I mean, the other student who on Friday was called, the police was called on him before he could even leave his apartment to come to class, he was livid as well because the other resident, who happened to be a black lady, now get this, who was also in a coding program as well, she didn't even see him in the coding program. She thought he was a thug that had moved into the building and was playing his music loud. Come to find out, his radio was sitting on the radiator and it was vibrating down to her apartment. So when it was, he wasn't playing it loud, but it was vibrating down in her apartment. She banged on his door. This was the third time in 3 days. He didn't answer because he was in the shower. She then proceeded to call the police. And then we found out that she had called the police on the students 3 other times. One, when they were studying in the lobby of this apartment. Now, mind you, we're probably the largest occupant, single occupant of these apartments. We're paying for 10 residences. And our students are being treated like crap because people don't think they belong there. And so, of course, I'm reaching out to the ownership of the property who we've got a good relationship with and saying, we've got to be sensitive to know what's actually going on. And these aren't kids who are trying to do the right thing. They're doing the right thing. And it's difficult. So we'll have to see how we navigate.
Hey, Rodney, I think, a bunch of things come to mind for me that I want to make sure that you stay mindful of as you navigate through, which is a great opportunity, also a great challenge, is that, a lot of people talk to me about getting people into these incubators, getting people into these coding programs, and even a lot of, for lack of a better term, upper middle class black folk talk about creating programs to make sure that there's more of us in the industry, but what they don't realize is that there's a cultural challenge to it as well, right? I mean, it's not just as simple as teaching somebody, what a variable is and how they code, but it's also helping them understand how the dynamics of their current life are going to map to the dynamics of this new life. I I was talking to somebody about this issue this morning, and they were fascinated, talking about, well, why didn't the kid go to the bank? Well, there's even a assumption within our own race that every black and brown person got a bank account, and if they did, the check cashing, the payday loans, all of those different industries wouldn't be multi-million-dollar industries. Right. So I think you have an opportunity to get rid of what I call the fairy tale anomaly, that all you need to do is take black people, put them in rooms to code, and that's going to solve the problems, right? Because most of those programs out there, they aren't focused on Pookie and them, and they'll tell you. I've heard people in speeches say, well, we're not focused on that aspect of our culture. We're focused on the people who are already in college, et cetera. And I argue our biggest opportunity to change the pipeline is touching people who otherwise would have no future. So I think that's what you're going to have to do, and your big challenge is helping those young men and those young women understand that it's bigger than the immediate concern or opportunity.
Yeah, and Rodney's having the same challenge that the NFL is having and that the NBA is having. And so it really is this cultural reality that at any moment you're given an opportunity to shift. That doesn't mean that the realities of where you come from change. And so whether it's a $500 check or a $500,000 check, whether it is going to the coding lab or whether it's going to the NFL practice facility, there's just a reality for us that says, how do we help our kids navigate opportunity and privilege? And that's the issue that I think, Rodney, is so compelling about what's happening, because even a kid who's been in a program for 1 week doesn't always understand I am now privileged, because I'm not making $1 million yet, because I don't have a coding job yet. But with privilege comes responsibility, and with privilege comes the necessity of knowing how to navigate it. The challenge is we can't sometimes put all this pressure on them to accept the responsibility when we haven't given them the tools of understanding that responsibility, and two, really helping connect them with brothers and sisters who have navigated it before. And so I just want to say, I think that between Ty and Navarro and myself, I know we'd love to offer ourselves to be available to help connect you to men and women who I think can share their own narrative. Okay. About where they come from, about how they've accepted privilege and opportunity, and how they had to navigate it, and even mistakes that they made in the process of navigating, because what you're giving them is unbelievable privilege and opportunity.
Agreed.
Absolutely. And Jeff, I just want to echo that sentiment. You know, from my own personal experience, Rodney, you know, I developed a program in Newark, I guess 8 to 9 years ago, with high school age students. That's not so dissimilar to yours, where you focus on you know, coding and what have you, but it was work readiness. One thing I want to say though, Jeff, is that while it is a weight to carry, and I think 1 week into a program, it is a grave responsibility for a young person to recognize that he or she too also has now a responsibility. But I do think that one of the things I learned from working with the high school students I was working with in Newark, hometown, is that when I was teaching them to how to set an alarm to get up to go to work, right? If that weren't their experience at home and something that they had already learned at home, if in fact they had come from a home where parents or family members didn't work, it does become their responsibility to help educate the people that are standing next to them and or behind them or in front of them or alongside them. So to that point, it is a challenge, because here they are trying to really uplift themselves and get to another level. But it is, you know, and Dr. Janetta Cole taught me this as the president of Spelman College while I was there. You lift as you climb, right? And so as I'm moving, there is a responsibility for them to educate alongside them. So that may be family members and or people within their community that don't understand necessarily their experiences and their plight and where they're going. So that is one thing that I think is really important, and is out of a tragic experience, an opportunity now, I think, within your program and other programs to help young people understand the education process that they're now dutifully responsible for, you know, with people next to them. Because there is an education process, right, where we're teaching now the cop as well as the family members, you know, as well as people who are like, well, why can't they just go to the bank, right? So we do have to help other people understand what that plight is, and I think that comes with them sharing their own narrative and owning their own narrative as well.
Absolutely. You know, I was speaking to the young man. And we were having this conversation, and it was interesting because he wanted to make the distinction between those with privilege and himself. And so then, of course, I became that person of privilege, because he's like, look, I mean, look at your building. I mean, look at what you're building. Look at what you have. And I said, it's interesting we're having this conversation with this, you know, you're sitting in here, you've got your legs crossed. You've got coffee, free coffee, by the way, that you can just go get anytime you want to. And we're having this intellectual conversation in the middle of Midtown. You, my friend, are now privileged and don't even realize it. And there are people that you probably used to know or still know that are now side-eyeing you because you now are the sellout, just that fast. And I think that you know, culture fit is a part of our curriculum, but what this incident has allowed us to do is actually bring it to life very quickly. And I think that just navigating the experience of this process in general, the community that's, you know, expected to come out of this from this cohort and the folks that they will then have to pass along this to, the activism that's a part of it, and just navigating just the corporate culture or tech culture in general, that now they do carry that responsibility, and that ultimately is a part of the weight that they have to carry. And you know, there have even been simple things like you have alluded to. You know, we have a resident director, but the first week the resident director had to say to many of them that, you know, showing up on time to class, like, that's not optional. Like, that's what you have to do. Or getting up in time, you know, to be on time is just a part of what we do every day. Hygiene is important. I know you're a lot of stress, but you know, you got to brush your teeth. You got to take your shower. You know, we got young ladies in the class. Hygiene is incredibly important. The ladies, you know, they don't want to come in the room and the room is funky or what have you. So, but in essence, they're getting it real time, and I am really proud of them, how they're syncing up and just getting the culture. You know, it was pretty disturbing when I read the Bloomberg article that talked about the young student entrepreneurs and the computer science majors at Howard, and how they were not assimilating well into the tech culture. And I really think that, you know, after having an opportunity to talk to some of the students, we took 50 students this year down to South by Southwest to really just, you know, immerse them into the culture and say, this is what this startup innovative ecosystem looks like. So we had an opportunity to talk to some of the Howard students, and they actually felt betrayed by the writer in some instances, and we sort of sat there and kind of dissected. And I think a part of the misconception was that students that attend HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, are not homogenous. Everyone is not coming from the gutter and getting their first chance. You know, you've got some folks who choosing to go to HBCUs because they were the only one in affluent or influential communities.
Or their fifth generation legacies.
Exactly. But the white male perspective in tech, when they hear HBCUs, they're thinking, they think they're like workforce development agencies. They're just longer programs. And so, but on the other side of that, there is a responsibility. You know, on my Medium post, I talked about lifestyle, and I talked about, you know, why we have to start earlier. You know, we live in a global society. We have peers and other cultures that are reading to their children at conception. Forget birth, they're reading to their children in the womb. They're coding in middle school. They're developing the computational and the analytical thinking skills in middle school. They're publicly speaking in high school, working at tech startups in the summer, and then starting companies as undergraduates. We can't compete against that if we start junior year of our undergraduate experience trying to be in this community. So I think it creates a kind of a balanced opportunity for us to hack both, you know, hack the perception of our culture, which sometimes creates that apologetic response of why we can't find the talent, whereas other talent gets the opportunity to fail on the way up the chain, and if we're not 100 in the chain, then we get eliminated because we represent the whole culture. And then on the other side, we got to hack, you know, we shouldn't be arguing with Atlanta Public Schools to let Paul Judge, myself, and about, you know, $2 to $3 billion worth of high growth startups valuations come to the school because you've got Cordon Bleu scheduled to come the same day. So we've got some, and this is a real example, we've got some issues that we got to hack on both sides.
No, absolutely, man. I think we all agree that the challenge is systemic, and you know, I think to Jeff's point, I think your program is a great example of one that actually is making significant difference. I argue there's a lot of programs that say they're making differences, but aren't really attacking the problem at the root and the core, which for me has always been the perception on both sides. And you know, we offer ourselves to you in any way, shape, or form to kind of connect you with the right people. You know, I'm quick to fly on a plane and come talk to people, so we'll put that there. But I think this has been, fantastic dialogue. I thank you for taking the time on a Sunday evening. I think that this is one of the episodes that will continue to generate conversation. But I know on behalf of Jeff and Ty, I wanted to thank you for sharing this story with us, and keep us updated on all the people in that program and how they make out and how things transpire, and if we can help in any way.
Please.
Thank you. This has been an opportunity for me to, have a release and kind of deal with some of the emotional issues related to it as well. But as we say, we are ecosystem. So
thanks, Rodney.
Thank you, man.
Thank you so much. I'll be in Atlanta April 21st through the 23rd. I welcome the opportunity to come down, meet your students, and chat with them.
Sure.
I definitely have some open time, so I look forward to connecting.
Absolutely. We'll make that happen.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Great. So we thank everybody for watching on Periscope and on Google Hangout. As always, we'll be here every Sunday at 6 p.m. One topic, four perspectives, the intersection. Talk to you soon. Be blessed.